Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And today we are going to talk about a very new book on Barack Obama. Its title is Barack Obama in Hawaii and Indonesia, The Making of a Global President. The author, Dinesh Sharma, is joining us, and the book is published by Prager. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
You know, in response to the obvious question, why another book on Barack Obama, you respond that this is different, that this is a cultural biography. So what is a cultural biography?
It's the biography of Obama's early years, the global years, the international years, the formative years, the first 18 to 20 years that President Obama spent in Hawaii and Indonesia, primarily off the mainland. Obama is the first president to be born in Hawaii, the first president to spend a significant amount of his childhood in Southeast Asia, namely Indonesia, the largest populous Islamic democracy. He's also the first president whose father was from Africa, and the first president whose mother really worked in Southeast Asia, mostly her adult life.
Yeah.
So he's really, as I argue in the book, a global president. And so his biography called out, for a cultural biography. That is a biography that looks at ethnographically on the places, the context, the scenes, the settings, the schools, the mosques, the streets where he grew up, and how those experiences shaped him.
Excellent. And it really does that. When I finished my reading in the book, I thought to myself, I now know this guy. I don't know whether the word is better, but certainly in a different way than I knew him before. For example, you say things, we talking about Obama's the first this, the first that.
Sure.
He's also the first president to be born and raised in the Pacific region of the world, and that's pretty amazing. Particularly where we are now, where the competition with us in terms of the future is coming from that part of the world.
Correct.
And so what we have here is a president who's come from a very different part of the world and whom you rate as a transformational president, not just an ordinary president. Yeah. Transformational is someone who tries to move a society to a higher level of moral reasoning, and to an improved state of social functioning. That's a heck of a task.
Yes, and we can already see, right, some of the challenges he's facing against the tenor of the transformational president and the pitch of wanting to be a transformational president as he started out in 07, 08, and how demanding that has been. So clearly a lot of promises were made early on, and some of those have been fulfilled, some not.
Some not, yeah.
And people are disappointed, obviously. But, as Jerry Burris, the editor of Honolulu Advertiser, said in a recent article, I'm just coming from Hawaii, actually, where I did a couple of book launches. He said, he's the first president we've elected who's not from Ohio. So by virtue of that very fact, he is very different, whether we're happy with him or not happy with him, whether we're content with what he has done and said so far, and what remains to be done, in the first term and possibly the second. Clearly, he's a different guy. We haven't elected a guy like this before in the 232 years of history of this country, for the very reasons that we just talked about. Also for the fact that, as I point out in the book, growing up in the Pacific with the rising, China, both economically and militarily, he understands the challenges. Having spent years on the Islamic street, literally Haji Ramli Street, and then Dempo Street in Jakarta at the age of 6, 9, 10, 11, he had Muslim friends, Christian friends. He went to the mosque, he went to churches. He understands the Islamic world from inside. And we've seen the effect of that in his foreign policy. Some have, been against it. Others have been for it. Clearly, the conservatives have been surprised by the level of effectiveness on foreign policy that he's displayed.
Well, the terrible thing about the conservative response to many of his endeavors is something that reminds me of the know-nothing situation many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. Don't give me any facts. I don't need to hear them. I have the truth. And the truth is you're wrong. And let's, get on with nothing because we don't care. It's a very frightening time. It's a very frightening time. And I think his intellect, where he comes from, frightens these conservatives.
Yeah.
In a way.
That we haven't seen before, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's partly a kind of generalized fear of the change that we're seeing that's taking place in the country, both domestically, demographically,
mm-hmm.
and globally.
I don't know. I think he's quite a guy, and I think that more since I read your book. But I am terribly, terribly worried about this upcoming election. Well, the fact of the matter is that a person is not shaped only by the places he's lived in and been educated in, but by people. In Barack Obama, in Hawaii and Indonesia, there's a chapter that you have there called The Women Who Shaped Obama. Want to meet them? Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Barack Obama in Hawaii and Indonesia, The Making of a Global President by Dinesh Sharma. That's what we're talking about today. And Dr. Judy Kuriansky of Columbia University says, in part, compelling and original, offers a unique psychological and sociological lens on the ascendancy of a young African-American boy. And that's African-American in a different way. And
yes.
it's hyphenated in the script, and it should be.
Right.
Yeah, the ascendancy of a young African-American boy to become the leader of the most powerful country in the world. And it is compelling. And as far as I'm concerned, it's original, since I had to ask you what this kind of biography meant in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
The business of women, either in your book or some stuff that I was reading when I was getting to your book, I read that the best presidents we've had were mama's boys. Did you say that, or did somebody else say that?
I borrow a quotation from another presidential historian who's looked at parents of presidents.
Okay.
The 43 presidents we've had prior to President Obama. This historian has looked at the presidents as well as the siblings. He's looking at the children of presidents. So there's a book about the making of the president that looks at the parenting and the upbringing that these selective group of men have had over the years to become the leaders of the free world. And one of the things that he found in his research, based on some psychological ideas as well, is that the role of the mother in the lives of these men, the boys, who then went to become presidents,
mm-hmm.
was overwhelmingly strong. These were women who were in some ways eccentric, strong-minded, very compelling in their ideas, and impressed these upon these young boys to become their own individuals, if you will, in many ways. So these boys grow up with a strong impress early on, formative kind of experience that's impressed on them by their mothers. And he's shown this in the lives of, from Washington all the way down to Bill Clinton.
Interesting.
And so Obama falls into that category. So when you actually peel through, as I say at the end of the book, when I actually peel through the cultural layering of Obama's life and upbringing in Hawaii and Indonesia and the Pacific, you find these early psychological markers that are normative vis-a-vis other American presidents. Strong mother, Ann Dunham, first anthropologist.
Now, Ann Dunham is not her full name.
Correct.
I demand that you state her full name.
Yes, Stanley Ann Dunham, yes. named after her father, Stanley Armour
Who
Dunham.
didn't want a girl.
Who did not want a girl. He was a World War II vet. He was he went into the war after Pearl Harbor, and wanted a boy, and so named his only daughter, Stanley Ann, and she lived with that name throughout her childhood. Didn't like it so much, but complained about it. And then, so as a result, partly, as I suggest in the book, and others have suggested as well, other biographers of Ann Dunham, that she went through 5 name changes over the course of her adult life. You know.
Well, this is because of multiple marriages.
Multiple marriages and divorces.
Yeah.
And the name changes that ensued. But certainly there was also that early kind of, feeling of uncomfortableness with her own, masculine name that she was given. And
the notion that it would be possible to work with people who were downtrodden and who needed help, they were poverty-stricken and so on. The notion that it was possible to help them, I think, came to Obama through her.
Correct.
She's an amazing woman.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, all the stuff she went through, and yet continued that life of what anthropologists, sociologists, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's amazing.
Yeah. And development worker. She did micro-lending, microcredits early on.
Yeah.
In the 70s. So she's really one of the female archetypes, if you will, that plays a significant role in Obama's life. And he calls her in youth, as a young child, at the age of 9, 3rd grade, he writes this essay, "What is my dream?" He says, "My mother is my idol. She's very beautiful. Yeah. She has long flowing hair.
Yeah.
I love to go to school in Indonesia. And one day I want to be PM." Which could have meant prime minister, paramilitary police, or president in translated to the American context.
Now there's a woman by the name of Madeline Dunham. Mm-hmm. This be grandma.
Yes.
And the first thing that stuck in my mind that you wrote about her was that she wrote or rewrote the escrow regulations of Hawaii.
Correct.
I mean, he's in trouble already. I mean, this is an amazing person too.
Yeah, she comes from humble beginnings from Kansas. She rises to become the vice president of escrow management at the Bank of Hawaii. She works there for 30 years. It's predominantly white bank, Republican bank at the time, and she rises through the ranks from secretary to become vice president. She's the one who bankrolls his education at Tupunahu Academy. His and his sisters, Maya Satoru's, Ing's, that's her full name. Mm-hmm. So she's really the matriarch in the family.
And she steps in at a point where there's been this divorce, and she takes over. I mean, she becomes the primary parent of Obama and pays for his schooling at that fancy school in Hawaii called what?
Punhu School, the Punhu School, and Punhu Academy.
Yeah,
it's the the elite school, private school on the island originally for missionary kids, but then it's open to everybody today. And Obama attends the school partly because his grandfather gets him admitted to the school, and Obama excels. And this is where he learns the skills, how to be a team player on the basketball team as well as in the classroom. He's seen as very intelligent.
We have one more woman to cover.
Sure.
And we'll do that when we come back. And when finishing the book, I got left some questions. And boy, I'm going to ask you when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
You think you know President Obama? Let me tell you, you don't. Until you get a chance to look at and read and think about Barack Obama in Hawaii and Indonesia, The Making of a Global President. It's a book written by Dinesh Sharma, published by Breaker, and Dinesh is with us for one more segment. And we've got to say something about the third woman whose major influence in his life. And that, of course, would be his wife, Michelle.
Absolutely. Michelle Robinson, yeah.
Yeah, and you said off air, and I want to get this on because I think it's an interesting insight, that you've been told by his sister?
Yeah, Maya, when I interviewed her, she said that Michelle Obama is more like their grandmother, Madeline Dunham, in the sense that she's, stable. She's the anchor in the family. She's lived and grown up in South Side of Chicago most of her life. And that's where President Obama, the young Barack Obama, finds his home and sets down his roots and becomes, if you will, in the words of Studs Terkel, the regular guy.
Yeah. This is when he's finished with law school and that.
Correct. Yeah, and of course, when he's clerking for the first year in law school, Michelle Robinson was his mentor.
That's right. She was with the firm before he got there.
Because he was doing community organizing for 3 years, so he goes to law school later. But but when he gets to law school, he's more mature, becomes the president of Law Review. So Michelle Obama completes the three significant sort of women archetypes, if you will, that play a significant role in shaping his destiny, his values, his vision of the world, and the kind of father, in a way, he's become to his own daughters.
Yeah. Before I get to the questions, I want to share a few lines from the book, which I think give a good, brief, succinct description of Obama's multicultural Jakarta experience. You write, during his early years in Indonesia, Obama grew up within a multilingual, multi-religious, and multicultural environment. His family members spoke different languages, practiced different religions, and came from remarkably different social and cultural worlds. Mm-hmm. That's got to have an impact
absolutely
on a young, what was he, 8 or 10 or
6 to 11 years.
6 to 11.
Yeah,
and it's an amazing way to come up in the world.
Absolutely, yeah, in the Pacific, literally.
Yeah.
So when he looked out from his home over the horizon, he saw the whole Pacific Rim in some ways, because he was traveling back and forth between Hawaii and Indonesia.
Yeah.
On Pan Am airline in those days.
Oh, good old Pan Am.
Right.
My wife works for Pan Am.
Right.
And we're not pleased with the program.
Okay. But anyway, so, as a young boy, he was traveling back and forth. So his view of the world was shaped by those early experiences in a tremendous way. His brain was wired, I argue in the book, by those early experiences, those sights, the sounds, the noises, the people, the chatter, the crowded streets, the poverty, the multiculturalism, the multi-religious society that he was coming up in. And I used various psychological theories, Piaget, Erickson, to make the case that this is when the child's mind is most imaginative, most magical, open to, global thinking. And this is where President Obama writes this essay that he wants to be PM. He's also, at that time, finding his place in the world. And as he said in his autobiography, he was watching American business coming into Indonesia. He was watching American influence through CIA coming into Indonesia. So he gets a sense of both the hard and the soft power of the American presence in Indonesia and shaping a fledgling democracy. Remember, the coup had just taken place in the late 60s to replace Sukarno with Suharto. And he lands there right after that. So he had a very good, sort of front row seat to the American influence.
One of the questions. Obama now faces a challenge that has confronted other transformative leaders in previous generations. To paraphrase Robert Frost, is Obama going to take the path less traveled and bring peace to the Afghan valley? Or will he be mired in the same obstacles that blocked Alexander the Great, Queen Victoria's loyal soldiers, and Leonid Brezhnev's comrades?
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen with him in Afghanistan?
Well, we know the drawdown plan, right? And I've been writing about this for Asia Times. The drawdown is supposed to complete by 2014, according to the U.S. and NATO plans. There, a contingency force of 30,000 troops will remain as advisory, with an advisory role in Afghanistan to the Karzai government. But other than that, the plan, at least as far as we know right now, is to do a complete withdrawal from the Afghan valley. with the caveat that if obviously things change on the ground, then the contingency force might be increased or decreased. Again, we don't know the exact plans. That's not been made public yet. There is I think a convention or a meeting that's supposed to take place between U.S. and Afghan governments sometime late this year, early next year. But so as far as the promises that he made in terms of ending the war in Iraq and then ending the war, escalating and then ending the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, President Obama is following through on that. Of course, there are multiple opinions on whether that's prudent or not. Clearly Romney, I think, is saying that the troops should not be pulled out and that they should be increased in Afghanistan.
You know what that says to me? That there's somebody still, walking around with we're going to democratize these infidel countries. And that's a crappy policy. Mm-hmm. That really is. It makes no sense. It's insulting. It's demeaning. But there's nothing insulting or demeaning in this book. This is a new way to look at the leader of the free world. It's called Barack Obama in Hawaii and Indonesia. The author is Dinesh Sharma. The subtitle, The Making of a Global President. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.